You might have done that in 5 minutes, but you're off with the fairies with this shit.
Tell me where.
Mental.
No. Tell me where I've been off with the fairies during
This month, one of the biggest shows in Australian radio was suddenly pulled off air.
Kyle, I totally am offended by you saying something like that.
Well, too bad if you are, because that's the reality of what we're dealing with here.
For years, Kyle and Jackie O have been treated as untouchable, a breakfast radio juggernaut that could pull huge audiences, generate endless headlines, and weather scandal after scandal after scandal.
I don't give you a hard time for becoming obsessed with American politics.
It's not about
Trump.
That's a completely different thing, Jackie.
But why, Kyle?
So much so that the Australian Radio Network handed the pair a $200 million deal, one of the biggest contracts Australian media has ever seen, betting Sydney's most popular breakfast show could go national.
You make out like you sit there like you're perfect.
No,
There are
I'm
so
not.
many
I'm
things
not.
that you
That's-
don't do, and I would never bring them up, and I would never say what people...
But that bet turned shaky. The show struggled to win over Melbourne, controversies kept on piling up, and the regulator repeatedly found it in breach of broadcasting standards.
Kyle,
You
to say you
can't
don't know
sit
what
here-
the F is
you
going on,
can't-
you're not doing your job, that's an attack, and I
It's not an
wouldn't do
attack.
that.
It's an actual fact, babe.
okay.
I'm so sorry. That's the reality of what's going
I would
on.
never do something like that to you.
Now, after an on-air rupture that has blown apart the partnership at the centre of it all, the future of that enormous deal is in doubt. I'm Daniel James, and you're listening to 7am. Today, Kyle and Jackie O's former boss and host of the Game Changers radio podcast, Craig Bruce, on what happens when the most expensive bet in the radio business falls apart. It's Monday, March 16. So this all started with an on-air fight. Now Jackie O is gone, Kyle's been suspended, and the network says his contract may be in breach. So can you just briefly explain where the show stands now?
Well, where it stands now is it's not returning as the Kyle and Jackie O show, I don't think, because they have terminated Jackie's contract. So they don't have a services agreement with Jackie Henderson. So where we find ourselves at the moment is that Kyle is obviously saying to his audience and to ARN that he's not in breach and that he'd like to be back on the radio ASAP. And ARN need to make a decision as to whether they want to continue down the path of termination. And so I think either whatever might happen, I think we've seen the last of the Kyle and Jackie O show. Unfortunately for their hundreds of thousands of fans, I can't see a world where Kyle and Jackie will be on KISS. Kyle Sandilands might be, although I think that percentage chance is really low, but it won't be the Kyle and Jackie O show.
It sounds like Kyle is trying to fight for his job.
Well, Kyle now says she's one of the most important people in my life. The idea that our partnership could end like this is devastating for me. He believes it was unreasonable for ARN to terminate her contract.
What did you make of his apology and statement this week?
Did he make an apology to Jackie? I'm not sure that he did. I think...
Probably a generous way to phrase it, eh?
Yeah, I think he was talking to his audience. I think he was reminding ARN that these listeners that are on KISS are his listeners, not theirs. And he was reminding them of what was at stake, which is if I'm not back on the radio, then the people who listen to me won't be listening to KISS. And he's right. When Kyle and Jackie leave a radio station, as they did at Today FM, and I was there through that period in 2013, they took their audience with them. It might be a little different this time around because I don't think Kyle will be on the radio anytime soon. I think he's going to be in courtrooms fighting this termination. But when he is back, his audience will follow him to wherever he goes, if in fact that is a radio station.
And what about Jackie's claim that there's more to this story and that she didn't quit? What do you think has happened behind the scenes there? Any insights?
I think they jumped the gun. I mean, clearly Jackie was upset. I mean, she had 2 weeks off the air. From the Gemma and Jackie camp, Gemma Fordham being her manager, the message I think to ARN was that either Kyle has to change or she leaves. And ARN, when this opportunity was presented to them by Gemma and Jackie, I think they were looking for okay, here's our opening salvo. We're unhappy. Things need to change. Kyle needs to change. ARN have gone, yippee, we're done. I think ARN have been talking about the business of Kyle and Jackie O and how that business is broken for a long time in boardrooms around the country. The contract is insane. It should never have gone ahead. And there's not enough revenue attached to the show. So this is about revenue. This is about the business of ARN, and this is ARN attempting to save their company, to be honest.
Yeah, let's just talk about that insane contract, because this isn't just any breakfast show. In 2023, ARN handed Kyle and Jackie O a contract worth $200 million for 10 years, which is just under half of what Ruby and I get paid for 7am. How unusual was that contract? And what was the rationale behind it?
Well, there were two bidders on the house. The other bidder was Southern Cross Austereo. The thinking from SCA was that, well, we've had 12 years of darkness and despair on Today FM. So whatever money we throw at Kyle and Jackie will be worth it, because their audience is going to be back with us and we will be number one again. And if the worst case scenario is that we don't get the deal done, we're just going to make ARN pay more than they should. And that's exactly what happened. So this 10-year deal and the amount of money at stake, radio cannot sustain it. I mean, it can't sustain it now. It's not going to be able to do that in 10 years from now. Who knows what media will look like in 10 years from now? The idea that any company can realistically pay two people $10 million a year each to deliver a radio show is just insane. I mean, the numbers haven't made sense for ARN for a while. I mean, this is a company that has 60 radio stations in 33 markets, and it made a profit of $6 million last year, whilst paying two of its staff members $10 million each. I'm not great at math, Daniel, but I don't know, that doesn't look right to me.
What did ARN think it was buying? I mean, what was it that they were trying to get by buying or throwing this amount of money at these two?
Yeah, it's a great question, Daniel. And I think the assumption was, or the only way this deal would work is that the show had to go national. It had to be a national product, and the scale of national advertising was the only way forward. And when the show went into Melbourne and failed so disastrously, that was a house of cards.
Can you believe 10 more years? I mean, I've
right.
never signed a contract for a 10-year deal
I know,
before.
not even your marriage, you never even thought we'd go 10 years.
I mean,
We might be in a different situation now if the success in Sydney was then repeated in Melbourne and then in Brisbane and then in Adelaide. That's what they were hoping for. That's what they were buying. They were buying, here's our first ever national breakfast show that can dominate every single market and can dominate the market from a revenue perspective. That's what they thought they were buying. And again, the launch into Melbourne was just horrific on so many levels. And that's when it really became clear that they stuck with this incredibly expensive show.
I guess history shows as well that nationally syndicated shows, particularly in Melbourne, don't really work and never really worked. I think there's been attempts to foist John Laws and Alan Jones on Melbourne at certain points. Did anyone do their homework on that front?
Yeah, we should have known, shouldn't we, Daniel? There was incredible hubris on their part. Kyle famously saying, I'm not going to get on a tram. They've been in the market for 2 years. They've visited the market twice. Essentially, the message to Melbourne was, you'll get what you're given. I'm not changing the product. I'm not changing the content. It's exactly as it should be. And the audience paid them back in kind. You can't be that disrespectful to an audience and expect them to, yes, sir, can I have some more? I mean, it's far too explicit, and it has no relationship to any new audience experience, which is what they would do. So they were going into a market for the first time and pretending that the audience knew them like the audience in Sydney does. Would have been successful if they launched well and better marketing and all those sorts of things. I think they would have been up against it anyway, but they didn't make it easy for themselves.
And you just don't diss trams, man. You just don't diss trams. Coming up, is this the end of the shock-jock era?
His shock-jock tactics have earned him fame and fortune, but this time Kyle Sandilands has gone too far. Obviously,
Craig, Kyle and Jackie O have been broadcasting together for close to 25 years, and during that time, they've had a long history of pushing the envelope and really an ongoing pattern of scandals and breaches of code that go well before this attempt to expand the program. Can you just give us a recap of some of that history?
Yeah, I mean, pick your poison. So I was at Today FM with them through several really bad days, embarrassing, shameful.
Last week's lie detector test on a 14-year-old girl backfired.
Have you had sex?
I've already told you the story of this. And don't look at me and smile because it's not funny.
She went on to reveal that she'd been raped. After days of calls for him and co-host Jackie O'Neill to be dumped, his manager contacted Oz Stereo, telling them he would be unable to perform his on-air duties today.
I stopped listening to Kyle and Jack when they left in 2013 and went off and did my own thing, and came back, started listening again in 2023 when I started the Melbourne Radio Wars podcast. So I hadn't heard them for 10 years, and I couldn't believe how explicit the show was.
All the girls here, well, not all of them, but a lot of them have recorded themselves urinating.
Yeah.
And the boys will try and figure out whose flaps made that wee.
And I wrote about it, an article in the newspaper, and just said, who is listening to this show?
What the hell does I'll always water your rose mean?
No, I'm dying.
That means it sounds like you're licking her vagina flaps.
Is ACMA listening to this show? Are programmers listening to this show?
A bit about young Roy. He's 18. Mm-hmm. He's got a drawer full of butt plugs, brand new, pulls a new one out every time he has sex with a different young lass, and then displays them by name on a shelf in his room.
It sounded like a YouTube porn channel, to be honest, and I just wondered how on earth they were managing to get away with it. But part of the problem is, Daniel, through each of the different situations that we found ourselves in with Kyle and Jackie O at Today FM, we never got complaints from their listeners, from their fans. What would happen is that the moment would happen and then it would be shared on social media to the secondary audience or in the news, and then that's when the pile-on would happen. There's this unconditional relationship that Jackie and Kyle have with their audience. They take the good with the bad. And particularly around Kyle, they accept that he's not perfect and he is flawed. And I think that was part of the problem with Melbourne, was that an audience was hearing it for the first time and going, what are you doing? What is this content? Whereas the Sydney audience were totally inoculated.
And so what kind of pressure was the show and the network under to clean up its act from both the regulator and from activist groups like Mad Effing Witches?
Yeah, ACMA have been next to useless.
As you know, under the co-regulatory framework, complaints need to be dealt with by the broadcaster first and come to us for investigation after that.
But MFWs have been incredibly effective. They are the antagonist in this story, and they have done a number, and they are celebrating. And they're also saying that if he's back on the radio, we're going after him again. We don't know how bad the revenue is in Melbourne for ARN, particularly out of breakfast. But if it's anything like the impact that MFW had on Alan Jones's show a few years ago, I mean, his revenue was down 45%. And that money returned as soon as he left. So this is why this idea that they might come and do radio again is fanciful. I mean, wherever Kyle goes, they will go, rightly or wrongly. But it goes to the heart of the business model of Kyle and Jackie O, is that it does not work in its current format.
So, Craig, what happens from here? Will we hear them on the airways either solo or together any time in the near future? And could either of them even have a solo career after all this has been a package deal for so long?
Yeah, they can. They're both brilliant broadcasters, and they will both, through necessity, find a path forward beyond this show. But, we'll never see another show like Kyle and Jackie O because, radio has changed, mainstream media has changed, the relationship with the audience will change. I mean, the people that are now have flooded to my podcast, Game Changers Radio, these are Kyle and Jackie O listeners, and they're coming to us because they're grieving and they want any information they can get on these guys, and they have this incredible connection with them. But that's been built up over 20 years. And it started when radio owned the rails from an audio perspective in 2004. If you didn't want to listen to a radio station on the way to work, you were driving in silence, weren't you? So I think new media and podcasting, they may need to look at that at some point, because I'm not sure there is another broadcast company that will take them on.
Finally, Craig, are we seeing the end of an era here? I mean, John Laws has passed away, Alan Jones is no longer on air, Ray Hadley has ostensibly retired. Are we seeing the end of an era in terms of the old shock-jock model, and it might have actually run out of road once and for all?
Yeah, and I mean, I think, Kyle and Jackie were ahead of their time. I mean, if you think of how we engage with content online now, it's driven by enragement, and I'm angry at that, and and the algorithm sends you things to make you mad, and Kyle and Jackie did that in a radio format 20 years ahead of anyone else. There's plenty of that content to go around. It's just not exclusive to radio anymore. There's plenty of shock-jocks, Joe Rogan, pick your poison.
Carl Stefanovic.
Carl Stefanovic and versions thereof. But the era of this type of show on radio, I think, is probably over. And I don't think I know this might sound weird, but I don't think that's necessarily a good thing for radio. Australian radio is famous for two shows. In my industry, the people I talk to overseas talk about Hamish and Andy, and they talk about Kyle and Jackie O. And two very, very different shows, obviously. But the excitement that Kyle and Jack have brought to radio on their best days will be sadly missed. I have a complicated relationship with them because, they're an amazing show, and they can be an amazingly frustrating show to listen to on occasions as well. But yeah, I think the era is over.
Craig, thank you so much for your time and for your insights.
No worries.
Also in the news, Jim Chalmers has warned that Treasury modelling predicts inflation is set to blow out thanks to the war in the Middle East. The Treasurer says inflation will likely hit the high fours, well outside the Reserve Bank's 2 to 3% target range. It comes ahead of an expected interest rate hike on Tuesday, which would be the second in as many months. And 3 more members of the Iranian women's soccer team have left Australia after changing their mind about claiming asylum. It means just 3 of the original 7 squad members who sought protection will now remain here as defectors. Home Affairs Minister Tony Burke says the players were given numerous chances to talk about their options, but ultimately it was their decision. I'm Daniel James and you've been listening to 7am. We'll be back tomorrow.